But he has killed so many people at our border by
Thank you,
allowing
President Trump.
all of these people to come in.
President
and it's a
Biden.
very sad day in America.
President Biden, you have the mic.
Every single thing he said is a lie. Every single one.
The debate generating plenty of headlines about what former President Trump and President Biden said, but what about what they didn't say?
Body language, a key part of any face-to-face. Here to talk about last night's matchup, Dr. Carol Lieberman is an American medical doctor, psychiatrist, and is on the board of certified forensic psychiatrists. Good morning and welcome to First Edition.
Good morning.
So let's get right to it. What message did President Trump and President Biden's body language deliver last night, in your view?
Well, President Biden showed a lot of signs of lying. You know, he's calling, don't call the kettle black. You know, he's projecting onto Trump what he's doing, basically. And some of these things, you can think of them as starting with S's, you know, and these signs are signs of stress. So now it's not just lying, but it's also that clearly Biden was under a tremendous, tremendous amount of stress. He wanted to be anywhere but on that debate stage because he knew he couldn't handle it. So, for example, the most obvious thing was his stare, his hollow stare. Then he was short of breath. Now, of course, they're trying to say he had a cold, but shortness of breath has to do with stress and anxiety and so on. He was shuffling. He as he went on, he was less and less able to speak because when you get stressed, you have less saliva. And then, of course, he was standing still in this kind of rigid posture. So all of those things. Now, another S, sundowning. They shouldn't have, I mean, I don't know that they had a choice, but obviously having the debate at 9 p.m. was really bad for Biden because people with dementia, and I've been saying that Biden has dementia since 2020 when he was in his basement running, people with dementia, when it gets later, the later it gets in the day, the more their dementia shows, the more they have less cognitive ability.
Right. And while the Democrats are saying that he had a cold, I mean, certainly people have alleged for sure that he might have dementia. It's not for sure, but clearly the signs are there. And that, you know, you're right to bring up the point in terms of what we saw on stage. It was really astonishing, his decline throughout the course of the 90 minutes. I mean, do you think, though, Dr. Lieberman, President Biden and former President Donald Trump were able to change anyone's minds based on their debate performance last night?
Well, yes. I think President Trump really impressed people more than they expected to be impressed. He was strong. He hit it out of the park. He brought up all kinds of important issues while Biden was, you know, standing to the side, sort of sputtering away. You know, I think Biden changed people's opinions, too, because we kind of expected him to come out, you know, being the State of the Union Biden, on some performance drugs and so on, right. And, you know, angry and agitated and all of that. And he was the opposite of that. Now, either they didn't give him drugs or they gave him a different drug, which didn't work as well, or his cognitive ability has decreased so much that regardless of what drug they gave him, it didn't bring him up enough.
But Carol, he actually prepped for like 6-7 days. That's a tremendous amount of time. But, you know, when you analyze the debate, as you were watching, as people talk, certain actions that they engage in, nonverbal communication, contradicts what they're actually saying. Some people say if you look down to the left or right, you might be lying. If you touch your nose, did you observe any actions on behalf of President Trump as well as President Biden that's really stood out to you?
Well, what I was saying before about, you know, his stare and so on, I mean, Trump did not do that. You have to also look at how the person is before the particular date or speech that or, you know, interaction that you're looking at, whether they do these things before that. And it's just for example, you know, if they do things normally before that, just in general conversation and so on, it's not lying. But the things that I was mentioning, you know, his standing rigid, he was basically a cadaver. You know, I just want to say about the dementia. As I mentioned, I've been saying this. I called it encroaching dementia in 2020, and it clearly has encroached. We saw all the signs. Yes, he rehearsed for a week, and what happened
So, Carol,
was,
I really want to keep this conversation focused not on medical elements like dementia or anything like of that nature, because it's not proven. But I really want to keep this on body language, if you don't mind.
okay, well, that's what I was saying before. The kinds of things that I mentioned are things that are all associated with lying. But at the same time, he was under a lot of stress. And these are typical signs of stress, because when people lie, they're under more stress because they're worried about being found out. So it's a little difficult, and particularly with his mental state, you see, the problem was, though, that he did for 7 days rehearse, and he had these lines, these kind of canned lines that he was going to say.
Right.
But then when he brought it into the conversation, he didn't know how to attach it to anything. I just think, of course his body language is important, but I think the overwhelming thing that people finally got to see, people who were still trying to doubt it, was his mental state.
At what point do you think President Biden and former President Trump were at their strongest based on their body language, and also at their weakest? If you could highlight certain other moments that you were viewing last night.
When Biden at his strongest, let's see.
It's hard to choose because there's so many points.
He did wake up at certain times. I don't know that it was very effective, but he did, for example, when he got angry. I know, in some ways you're not supposed to get angry, and Trump wasn't supposed to get angry, and he didn't. He really kept it very well modulated and so on. But when Biden, finally, when Trump got through to him about something and he got angry, he was able to put a few more thoughts together. And his pointing that that's something that could be lying, but it's also, it was at least showing that he was connected to what he was saying. And Trump was, he was coming across with one point after the other: Afghanistan, the debacle that was, Israel, all of these things. One strongly, and he did emphasize it with his hands,
Right.
and that and his stature, his body, his actual body, he was standing in a very strong, imposing kind of way, and it gave you the impression that yes, he could do these things that he's talking about.
So, Dr. Carroll, here's my body language to Joe Biden, because I think he's not going to be the candidate. I think the Democrats will likely replace him after his poor performance, as they should. But Dr. Carol Lieberman, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Very welcome.